Welcome to section 7. We've covered most of the basics in Photoshop, and in this section, we will be covering another essential part of Photoshop: text. In this section, I will show you all the tools you need to create text and shapes in Photoshop. I will be teaching you how you can insert simple text like this in your photos. You will also learn how to draw simple shapes like circles and rectangles. By the end of this section, you will be able to combine all the knowledge you've learned here to create a beautiful typography images and quotes photos. I created all these images a few years ago, and although they look complicated, they are extremely easy to create. If you want to create posters, logos, or any other design works, this will be an important section for you. Before you can learn how to create text, you will first need to understand an important concept: the concept of raster and vector. This knowledge is particularly important in the context of text and shapes. First, let's understand what a pixel is. A pixel is a single unit element, and an image is made up of many pixels. Thinking about it another way, a pixel is just a tiny square of a single color, and an image is made up of many different pixels, which can be of many different colors. You can see that these pixels, when you zoom in all the way in Photoshop, these tiny squares here are pixels. So, this image size of 1920 pixel width means that there are a total of 1920 such squares horizontally, and 1280 pixel height means that there are 1280 such squares vertically. So, a single image like this is made up of 1920 multiplied by 1280 number of squares, which is 2.4 million squares. Each of the 2.4 million pixels contain a single color, and they make up your overall image. JPEG and PNG photos are all made up of pixels. If you take a photo that's 16 megapixels, it means that there are 16 million tiny squares in that one image. In general, the more pixels there are, the higher the quality, as you have more squares to represent the different colors. Now that we understand what a pixel is, let's understand what a raster is. A raster is simply an image that's made up of pixels. This image here is a raster, as it is made up of pixels, and the photographs you take on your handphone and camera are all raster images. There are usually only two kinds of images we encounter in the world: a raster or a vector. A vector, unlike a raster, is not made out of pixels. They are instead made out of mathematical equations. The circle here is a vector made out of mathematical equations. Colors are allocated to the picture through these equations. So, if an image is made out of pixels, it is a raster. If it is made out of mathematical equations, it is a vector. What are their differences though? First, you won't be able to scale a raster infinitely since they are made out of pixels. When you try to scale a raster such that it is bigger, which in other words means a larger pixel width or height, Photoshop will try to estimate new pixels to insert based on the current pixels of the image. But this algorithm is not perfect. Hence, when you try to enlarge your photos, they can look very pixelated and of low quality. On the other hand, there will be no loss in quality when we enlarge vectors, as we are simply changing the equation. A vector will always look sharp and crisp no matter how much you scale it up. However, for more complicated images, we aren't able to use vectors, as there's no such mathematical equation which can represent them. Hence, our photographs are always in raster format. Photoshop, at its core, is a raster program. The brush tool simply inserts pixels into your image. Most Photoshop operations are raster operations. The image filter also simply looks at the color of existing pixels before changing the color value of each pixel. However, some tools like text and shapes are vector-based. This knowledge of raster versus vector is important as the basis for this section. Now, let's see how this knowledge is applied when creating text in Photoshop. When creating text in Photoshop, you will be given two choices to create horizontal or vertical text. This is available in this tool over here. You will usually want to create horizontal text, so let's go ahead and do so now by clicking on the horizontal type tool and typing something here. For example, let me type Photoshop is powerful. And you're done. You've created a text. You can adjust the text size by going over all these options at the top. You can change the text fonts over here. By default, Photoshop comes loaded with tons of different fonts available for you to choose. The secondary option over here varies with the fonts you've selected. Selecting some fonts will allow you to select further options like regular, bold, italic, whereas other fonts are standard and won't allow you to do so. Over here, you will be able to set your alignment of words, whether left aligned, center, or right. To change your text color, you can click on this box here and select your desired color. Once confirmed, you can click on the OK button and the text color will be changed. In fact, you can change your color from the foreground color. If you want to adjust only certain words in your entire text, just highlight the words and make the same adjustments. Another way to change the color is to apply a layer style and go to Color Overlay, set the style to be normal, and select a color filter over here. Moving on, to change the size of your text, you can click on any of the sizes here. If not, you could also use the free transform tool, which is more convenient. Press the shortcut Ctrl-T and you will be able to enlarge or shrink your text. You can even press Ctrl-T and then rotate the text. Press Ctrl-T, then right-click, and you can see all the different options you can choose, such as flipping your text. In newer versions of Photoshop, when you drag to enlarge or shrink, Photoshop will automatically do this proportionately, such that your aspect ratio is kept. If you do not want to maintain the proportion, you will have to hold down the Shift key while you drag the corner. To edit the text, click on the Text tool and click on the existing text. Then, you will be able to change the text to whatever you want. Take note that you should be at the Text tool to edit your text. If you are at the Move tool, for example, you will be moving your text layer instead. The only difference between the horizontal and vertical type tool is the way your words are shown. For the vertical type tool, the words will appear vertically, like this. In the previous video, we learned about the difference between raster and vector. Text are vectors. As you can see on the layer here, text has this T icon instead of showing pixels. What this means is that when you create a text, you can scale them indefinitely without losing quality, so that your text will always look sharp. Since text is a vector, what this means is that you cannot use raster operations such as brush to paint over, neither can you use the eraser. You can still use the layer mask though. If, however, you want to perform raster operations on your text, you can rasterize the layer by right-clicking on the layer and clicking Rasterize. Rasterization converts the text to raster, so make sure you scale your text to the appropriate size first, as scaling after rasterization will affect its quality. Once you've rasterized the text layer, you will see that the text icon will be changed to show the pure pixel form. So now, I will be able to use the paintbrush to paint on the layer. Do also note that when you rasterize your text, you will no longer be able to edit it. If you try to do so, you will be creating a new text instead. Make sure all the words are written correctly before you rasterize. In general, if you have no need for rasterization, do not rasterize it. Keeping your text in vector form gives you much more flexibility. Before we move on, let me give you a small tip. Sometimes you only want to edit the existing pixels and don't want to touch the transparent pixels. In this case, you can simply lock the transparent pixels. This makes all your transparent pixels uneditable. If you were to paint on this layer, you will only be able to paint on the existing pixels. This is great because you won't need to worry about going out of line and can create, for example, nice color effects. We have covered the basics of creating text. So now, let's look at how we can edit our text conveniently using the Character panel. To find the panel, go to Window, and you'll be able to find the Character panel, which is mainly used for text editing. This panel compiles all the functions you need to edit a text. You'll be able to do many things, such as change the font here, and also the font size over here. This option here allows you to set the leading. Leading allows you to set the gap between paragraphs. Let me demonstrate. I'll first type a text and then set the leading. This number basically sets how big the space is in between paragraphs. You can set the leading to auto if you want to have the default paragraph space. Over here, you will be able to set the tracking. Tracking allows you to set the amount of space between letters. Set this number to a positive one to widen the space between each letter and negative to close the gaps. Set it to 0 for the default gap of the font. The option to the left of it is called the kerning. The kerning is similar to tracking, but you will only need to use tracking most of the time. The option here gives you a variety of effects to choose from. For example, the first one is called Faux Bold. Faux Bold allows Photoshop to force a bold effect on the original text. Some fonts come with a bold option. For example, this Arial font allows us to select a bold type. This is the bold that the font creator has created for the particular font. This is different from the faux bold. The faux bold is in a way a fake bold that Photoshop applies to all types of font. For example, the Arcan font here does not have a bold option, and using the faux bold will force a bold for the font. The same concept goes for the faux italic option over here, and all the other options. Faux means fake, and the bold and italic are imitations for the font. Although these are not created originally by the font authors, they are very handy, and I use it quite often when working with text. If your editing requires you to use text often, I'll recommend that you leave this Character panel open so that you can adjust these functions. So far, we've learned how we can create and manipulate text. Let's take a look at how we can add more effects and different styling options to our text. First, let's start with the Layer Style option, which is a very useful option. We have learned this earlier in section 6. To recap, you can double-click on your layer to open this panel over here. With text, what we are mostly interested in is adding strokes to your text. Here, you can change the color and size of the stroke. Also, let's see how we can give our text an inner shadow or drop shadow effect. You can explore all the different options here, and they are exactly the same as what we have gone through earlier. If you would like to change the color of your text, you can go to Color Overlay, select Normal Blend Mode, and choose a color. You can see the color of your text change in real time. To create gradient text, select the gradient color option and experiment with the different settings until you get what you want. As you can see, the Layer Style panel is extremely useful when styling your text. Next, let's look at another styling option, which only applies to text types. First, select the text tool. Then, find this icon over here and click on it. You will see many styles here that you can choose from. Let's select the arc over here. We can then adjust the sliders here and see that our text is now arced at an angle. There are many other options here you can use as well. For example, the fish effect will look like this. And if you select the wave effect, it will look something like this. Feel free to explore with all the different options. As you can see, there are many options here that we can apply to our text. Take note that this styling option only applies to text and not with a normal layer. Go ahead and experiment with the different styles you can add to your text. Let's now look at shapes in Photoshop. To create shapes, navigate to this icon over here and right-click on it. You'll see 5 preset shapes that you can use in Photoshop. Let's start with the rectangle tool. Click on it, hold down your mouse and drag to draw a rectangle. There, we have successfully drawn a rectangle shape. To draw a square, hold down the Shift button when you draw. When drawing your shapes, ensure that you are selecting shape at the top here and not other options. With shape selected, you will be drawing a vector. If you select pixels, you will be drawing pure pixels and thus a raster format. I would recommend you draw your shapes in vector formats so that your shape quality won't be lost when you make changes to them. You can free transform your shape by pressing Ctrl T. You can resize your shapes to your desired size. You can rotate your shape as well, and also right-click to access the other options as well. With a shape drawn, you'll be able to change some of its settings at the top here. You can change the fill color by pressing this button and selecting your desired color. To add a stroke color, press this button and select a color. This pixel value here indicates the size of your stroke, so you can adjust that as well. These other options here are not very useful, and I personally only use the fill and stroke options most of the time. Now, let's look at how we can draw different shapes. Right-click here, and you can see other kinds of shapes, such as the rounded rectangle tool. Your rectangle now has a rounded corner at the side. To change the size of the rounded corner, change the value of the radius option here. And redraw your shape with a different rounded corner value. Other shapes include circles and lines. The polygon tool here allows you to select the number of sides you want for your shape. So, having 3 sides will make it a triangle, 4 sides will make it a rectangle, 5 sides will make it a polygon, and so on. let's look at the Custom Shape tool. This tool allows you to draw more interesting shapes. Select it and go to the bar at the top over here. You can change your shape from this drop-down menu. There are many different shapes available for me to choose from, as I have previously imported these shapes. For your computer, you will not see all these shapes as you have not downloaded them. In the next section, I will show you how you can import these external shapes. Meanwhile, do note that you are not restricted to only triangles and squares, as you can download all sorts of interesting shapes like stars, banners, and so on. Shapes will be extremely useful when designing graphics like banners or posters. Now that we have learned shapes and text, let's look at some of the case studies. In this case study video, I will show you how you can create typography images together with some tips. Typography images, such as those quotes photos you see quite often on the internet, are not difficult to make. In the past, I created 5 typography images, and today, I'll be showing you how I created them. The working file for each image is grouped together, so that I can toggle them easily. I'll be showing you how you can group images in the next section, section 8. And let's start with the simpler one. Over here, you may have noticed that there is a warning sign at the layer here beside the text. This warning tells me that the font is not installed on my computer, so I won't be able to edit the text, but I'm still able to display it. This warning is here because I created those images in my old computer, and I used external fonts which I have not installed on this computer. However, the problem of the missing font won't be an issue for this case study, as I will not be editing this text. This image here in the background is a free stock photo I found online. Then, this image is made up of 2 texts positioned in this manner and a shape in the middle here. I downloaded this atom shape online. It's not a default Photoshop shape. And there, we're already done. Next, let's look at the second photo, which is similar to the previous image. You simply have to create the text here and the rectangle shape here. You can use the line shape instead of rectangle as well, but I personally prefer using the rectangle shape and free transforming it. Do note that each text is created as separate layers so that you have more flexibility with the positions of your text. Let's move on to a more complicated image. The background here is also a free stock image found online. This is the original image, and I cloned the background at the top to allow more free spaces to put text. Remember from the clone tool lecture before that you can clone the background to give yourself more free space. Let's look at this shape here. You can find this shape online, but I didn't use custom shapes for this. What I did here was to draw a rectangle and delete parts of the image away. But remember that you have to rasterize your shape first before you delete parts. Hence, I only need to use the polygonal lasso tool as it allows me to select straight lines easily and draw the shape to delete. Do the same to the other side and you achieve the shape. This shape at the top is the same too. Select unwanted parts from a rectangle and draw this shape. The color overlay at the layer here makes this color pink. In this image, I used different fonts. Font placements and design is entirely up to you. Let's move on to the fourth image now. This is quite an interesting image. The word here is not a solid color, but is filled with the background image. There are various ways to create this image, and I'll be showing you one possible way. Let me hide this first, and I'll recreate it. First, draw a rectangle here. Give it the color white, and lower the opacity to make it semi-transparent. Then, add the text. Yawn is a black. The font may be a little different from the original, but that's not important. Next, align the text and shape to the desired position. Once done, merge the two layers. So, be sure your rectangle is at the right opacity and the word is placed correctly because there's no going back. Once you've confirmed and merged the layers, double-click the layer to open the layer style. Then, all you have to do is drag this option to the right and your text will be transparent. Make sure you're selecting the Bend If Gray. And that's how you create this text. The remaining parts are just the normal rectangle shapes and a circle at the top. For this shape, I drew an ellipse. Then, gave it a white stroke with no fill. Then, rasterize it. And delete the bottom to get a portion of the outline. The two lines can be drawn using line shape or rectangle shape. So, you can actually create a lot of interesting shapes with all these basic shapes over here. All you need is a little bit of creativity. Lastly, let's look at this image here. This image consists of a normal background and some text with special fonts. I added a few hexagons by using the polygon tool and selecting 6-sided polygon. Afterwards, simply adjust the opacity, colors, size, and position them accordingly. And we're done! Creating beautiful typography images like this isn't difficult, and you're more than capable of doing that now. Make use of external fonts online, as well as external shapes. I will talk more about adding external fonts and shapes in section 8. All you need to do is to adjust the font, position the text correctly, and add some shapes to make your overall image more interesting. You can also find inspiration online and see how others position their text to achieve a nice overall image. I'm sure you'll be able to do it. Good luck! In the previous video, I've shown you 5 typography images. In this video, I will show you 20 more that I've done in the past so that you can see the underlying layers and understand how these images are created. Hopefully, this will give you a better idea of how you can go about creating such images. The PSD file for these images are available for download in the resources if you're interested. Let's look at the first image. For this case study, design isn't the important part. What's important is looking at the underlying layers and understanding how images like this are created from scratch. As you can see, this image is made up of many shape layers. This stroke here, outside of the coffee word, is a rotated rectangle shape, which was duplicated to form these rectangles here. The background is a stock image found online, and these are text layers positioned in different areas. It's pretty simple. The next image looks more complex, but isn't really. It consists of a white rectangle shape set at opacity 15% to give it the transparent look. Then, these are different texts with different fonts positioned differently at different sizes. Some of these fonts have the yellow warning sign I talked about in the previous video, but that's fine. Also, these rotated words here are made using the free transform option. The next image consists of more shapes and text. These are rectangle shapes at different sizes and opacity. This fire here is a shape downloaded online. So, for images like this, simply position text and shapes with different background images. Now, next image. Again, simply play with the text fonts, sizes, and different shapes to achieve this effect. This curvy line is also a shape pack that I downloaded online. I will show you how to get external resources in section 8. Sometimes, if you want to have different colors, you can separate the layers of the letters into different layers. For example, this letter Y is much bigger than the other letter. If you look at the layers, you will notice that it is a separate layer with the single letter Y. This gives you flexibility in positioning, resizing, and recoloring of the different letters. Here, the letters intentionally collide with each other. This is done by going to the Character panel and setting negative tracking here. So, your letters will be closer to each other. This next image is made up of a shape duplicated 10 times, and a text here. Over here in the next image, it is just shape and text. In this image, this fancy shape is again an external shape downloaded online. The coffee first text here is achieved using the warped text effect that we have learned previously. We have also learned how to create this transparent text in the previous video. A tip I have for you is that if the background is not blurred, you can actually go to Filter and select the Gaussian blur to blur the background, so that your text stands out better. This next image is slightly more interesting. The text over here is not created with the text tool, it's created with the brush tool. I had the smoothing set to 100% so that I can write curves better. This entire layer is handwritten using the brush tool. So, if you have a graphic tablet or if you are using a mouse, you can write your own text with the brush tool as well. In this next image, the wavy lines here are not shapes. They are drawn with a brush tool. So, you can actually use the brush tool on a new layer to add some designs to your work as well. The next image is a shape, with adjustments made to the opacity and color. It's a pretty straightforward design. These letters here are from a special font that comes automatically with the heart-shaped background. The quotation is also a special font. So, with external fonts, you can create these types of images easily. This next image here is just playing around with colors and sizes. Note that the letter M is on a single layer on its own, and the size is different from the other letters. In this image, I added this layer to the background to give it a darker effect. This layer is done by painting with the soft brush tool and setting the brush opacity down. So, you can do something like that to darken your background. This next image is a very straightforward image, just different fonts and sizes. This image here is just a shape. I have rasterized it so it is a normal layer now. Before that, I added some strokes to it and changed the color in the color overlay option. Again, this next image is a background shape. This image is also very straightforward, with a text positioned at the top. I put a darkened color overlay with black, darken the mode, and an opacity at 10% to darken the background. This makes the text easier to read. This is a quick and effective way to darken an image. I think this next image is pretty good, and I actually like it a lot. This image mainly concerns the positioning of text and bolding some words. So, as you may have realized, the positioning of text is really important. Finally, this last image is a very simple one. Just two text layers and a background. After seeing these examples, I hope you have a clearer understanding of how these types of images should be created. You can find background images like the ones I use easily online by searching for free to use background. There are millions of background images online for you to use freely. I hope the 2 case study videos I've gone through on creating typography images have been useful to you.